Welcome to this fifth video in the Redemption 101, the addiction series. Today we're going to continue in our case study with Hannah, and so we're gonna continue looking at her story here. We are in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 1. And in this story of Hannah, we're going to be looking at how this affected her whole person. And then we're going to talk a little bit about trauma. This would be a good video to pair with, for those of you in the community, in the classroom tab, the biblical behavioral health or mental health, addressing mental health and ministry course. There is one called the progression of trauma. We're going to pull a little bit from that one. And then we're also going to pull from the diagram that we had that I provided for you guys in the previous video about the components of the self, right? So we're gonna be taking a look at both of those in this video, in this lesson, in this session here. And so 1 Samuel chapter 1, we see here again we're gonna be focusing on the word, the topic trauma. Okay. Trauma, if I could give you guys a definition of the word trauma, we first have to understand something called the stress response, right? The stress response is it is a natural built-in safety mechanism for us, and it's for the purpose of safety, for our protection, right? When we talk about the stress response, that is the body flooding our system with the stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, the two primary ones, and for the purpose of giving us the ability to either get away from a threat or to fight off the threat. You might hear a lot the fight or flight response, right? Either you fight the thing off or you get out of there as quickly as possible. When it comes to trauma, trauma is really a dysregulation of the stress response, and trauma is when the unregulated stress response actually takes the place of the primary pain. Again, I would encourage you to watch that video on the progression of trauma. When our stress response is dysregulated, in other words, it kicks in at inappropriate times, right? It kicks in when there is no threat present. When that stress response kicks in or becomes dysregulated, meaning it kicks on at inappropriate times when there is no threat, it can elevate to the point where it has now had an impact on our daily activities. It has had an impact on our social relationships. We're not going to the bowling alley like we used to. We're not going to the movies. We're not taking walks in the park. We're not going to the gym like we used to because the anxiety is too high. And then also our social relationships. We're not calling our friends like we used to. We're not hanging out with them. It's impacting your marriage. It's impacting your relationship with your children or with your parents. And when it gets to that point, right, where the dysregulated stress response is now interfering, it's increasing in intensity and it's increasing in frequency. In other words, more often and more powerful, right? And it begins to really interfere with your life. Now we've reached the point of trauma. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about here, because there are really two responses to trauma, and we'll get into some of that. I had somebody tell me one time, a client, sharing her traumatic experiences with me, and she said to me one time that probably the most traumatizing thing for her was not just an event, right? It wasn't just an event that was traumatizing. It was when she got to the point when she realized I didn't react in the way I thought I would. Okay, one of the best ways to, one of the simplest ways, one of the easiest ways to become traumatized, right? To begin to suffer from trauma is to believe that in a certain situation you would act in a certain way. And then when that situation hits, you react in a completely different way, right? And so keep that in mind, right? Anytime that we ever make the statement, well, I'll never do that, or if that ever happens, this is what I would do, right? Trauma, like one of the easiest ways to become traumatized is to think that way now when you've never been in the situation, and then when the situation hits, you react in a completely opposite or completely different way than what you thought you would. So just keep that in mind. I thought that was pretty insightful insightful, right? And so let's take a look at Hannah here. Okay, we're in 1 Samuel chapter 1. Going back to our case study, the Bible says that Hannah could not have children. Okay, so that was affecting her medically, right? Physically. It was affecting her physical body. It was affecting her relationship with her husband, and it was affecting her relationship with her husband's other wife, right? She was able to have children. Hannah wasn't. And so I'm trying to blank what her name is here. Anyway, she was teasing Hannah about it, right? She was bullying Hannah. And so it was affecting her personal relationships. We see that she talks about she was grieved in her heart, right? And she talks about that she was pouring out her soul before the Lord, and so that's affecting her will, that's affecting her emotions, that's affecting her mind. And the Bible says that she actually believed that the Lord had closed her womb, so that was affecting her spiritual life, right? So we see here that as a complete person, right, her body, her soul, her spirit, and then also her relationships were all impacted here, right? They were all impacted. And so when we look at that diagram of the entire person, she had a low quality of life in every single measurable area. Okay, every single measurable area, she had a decreased quality of life, and so she made one decision. Okay, she made one good choice here in this situation. As far as we can see, she made one decision that actually ended up turning her whole situation around, and that is that she actually went to the house of the Lord. She went to the tabernacle and she went to pray, right? Or I'm sorry, the synagogue, right? And she went there to pray, and she went there to speak to the priest, right? She had a conversation with Eli the priest. Now, I want us to take caution with something, okay? Because I was confronted with this question a long time ago, and was asked for my response, and I don't know how well my response was received by the person asking the question. But the question was, there are certain communities that historically have had a lot of trauma as a community, right? They've experienced a lot of trauma as a community, and the question was, how are those people supposed to heal if during their traumatic experience, during their traumatic period as a group, right? There was no therapist, there was no counselors going in there was no social workers going in there was no, right? And so the question was, how are they supposed to heal? And my response was, those professions didn't exist at that time, right? The therapist did not exist at that time. 100, 200, 300 years ago, the profession did not exist. The counselor did not exist. The social worker did not exist. Those roles, right? Those responsibilities fell on the family system. They fell on the religious leaders. They fell on the village elders and things like that, right? So those responsibilities really, going back to the beginning of humanity, right? I mean, those academic fields are actually pretty recent, right? But going back to the beginning of our existence, right? The beginning of our ability to be civilized as human beings, as a species, right? Those responsibilities, a lot of that fell on the family system, the family unit, and it fell on the religious leaders. And the religious leaders were oftentimes the village elders, right? And so religious leaders really were the original counselors. We were the original therapists. We were the original social workers, right? And so all of the nuts and bolts, all of the functional parts of what these different academic fields do was actually first done by the clergy, right? It was originally done by the ministers. It was done by the religious leaders. And so even if you read the Bible, right, Isaiah talks about the spirit of power, the spirit of might, the spirit of the Lord, right? The spirit of the fear of the Lord. One of those is the spirit of counsel, right? And so counseling is a part of what we are anointed to do. All right. Now, here's the caution, right? The caution is that although we are we are anointed to counsel. That does not, number one, absolve us of our responsibility to study, absolve us of our responsibility to gain those skills, right? It doesn't absolve us of our responsibility to know what we're doing. And it darn sure does not absolve us of our responsibility to know when we are out of our league, okay? To recognize when the people that we are working with need something higher or something more intense than what we could provide. Okay. And so we've got to know when to refer out to the professionals, right? We've got to know when to refer out to I'll say it this way, the academic professionals, right? Those whose specific training, intensity of training is for that purpose, right? Especially when it comes to trauma, when it comes to addiction, when it comes to severe mental illnesses, we've got to know when to refer out, right? However, I will also say that there is a place, and we'll get into this, when we're talking about modalities of treatment, there is a place for high intensity in residential inpatient, low intensity inpatient, high intensity outpatient, and low intensity outpatient. There's a place for all of those, right? There is a time and a place. The thing that has shown the greatest results is long-term support services, long-term support services. In other words, something that we can, something that the people who are seeking help can fall back on, day after day, week after week for a long period of time. And we're talking about if possible, for the rest of their lives, right? Long-term support services. What entity on the planet is better prepared to provide long-term support services than the church, right? What entity on the planet is better prepared to provide that than the church? We're just positioned to do it, right? We're positioned to do it. And so I went on a little bit of a rant there, right? But we see here, Hannah actually, she goes to the temple, okay? She has an experience in this temple, the Bible says, where she pours out her heart, she pours out her spirit, she pours out her soul. And the Bible says that this experience was so intense that even though she was praying, there was no words coming out of her mouth. She was praying, but just her lips were moving and no words were coming out. It was that deep and that intense of an experience, and so much so that the priest actually thought she was intoxicated. She says, "No, sir, right? No, I'm not intoxicated. I'm just really hurt, right? I'm just really pouring out my heart before the Lord here. Please don't think of me as an evil person. I'm just pouring out my heart, right?" And I've been in situations. I've been in sessions. I've been in counseling sessions. I've been in situations where people get to that point, right, where they begin to pour out their heart, and the tears are flowing, and they're crying, and I mean it's just. If we don't know how to handle those situations, right? If we don't know how to handle those situations, it could get difficult, right? It could be more detrimental than helpful. So I'm going to share with you guys a tip here, okay? I'm going to share with you guys a tip. Number one, okay, if you're ever in a situation as a minister where you have an opportunity to counsel somebody and they end up getting to that point, all right, number one, recognize when to refer somebody out, okay? But when you're there, if you're at that point, the first and most important thing that you've got to let them know, okay, is that they're in a safe place. All right. Now, here's where I'm going to pull a little bit from the progression of trauma lesson, right? Because even though they know they're in a safe place, okay, safety and safe and unsafe, that's not, to the traumatized person, that is not the balance there, okay? For us who are not traumatized, those of us who are a traumatized mind hasn't overridden the rational mind, right? For those of us who are thinking in our rational minds, we might think that we want to present the options to the people of safe versus unsafe, right? I'm a safe person. That's not a safe person. This is a safe location. That's an unsafe location, right? And we almost get to the point where we want to demand adherence to doing the thing that is safe, right? We almost want to get to the point where it's just like, just do the safe thing, just trust the safe people. However, to the traumatized mind, it's not safe versus unsafe. It's actually safe versus familiar. Okay. Safe versus familiar. And to the traumatized mind, safe doesn't win that battle. Okay. To the traumatized mind, familiar wins that battle. Somebody might, in their rational thinking, might say, Pastor, minister, I know you're a safe person, right? But I don't know you. I know you're a safe person, but we just met, right? And so the familiarity actually overrides the safety. You even think about, for example, somebody who, and I'm going to throw this one out, right? Somebody who is using a street drug, and a doctor wants to prescribe them a prescription medication that could help them get off of the street drug, and the response is going to be, I've never taken that medication before. I don't know what to expect from that medication. I don't know if it's a good thing or not, right? At least with the street drug, I know what to expect. You might think about, somebody in an abusive relationship, and we might think, we might just want to just grab the person by the shirt collar and say, look, they're not a safe person. Just get away from them. Right. And the traumatized person might say, look, man, they're not safe, but at least I know what to expect from this person, right? If I leave this person and I end up with somebody else, or I end up all alone, right? I don't know what to expect. At least in this situation, I know what to expect. And for those of us, in our rational minds, we might be thinking that is so strange, right? It doesn't make sense. Exactly. Right? Exactly. That is why that's where the disconnect comes in, right? That's why I'm letting you know this now, that if you ever come across somebody who is in a traumatized state, their way of thinking, their way of behaving doesn't make sense. Because we're thinking rationally, they've got a traumatized mindset. It's not going to make sense. That's where the disconnect comes in. All right. We've got to realize that the only way to help this person is that the safe person and the familiar person have got to become one. Okay. The safe person has got to become the familiar person. All right. Once the safe person and the familiar person are the same person, right? Once they get to know you well enough, once that relationship is developed, once they realize you are a safe person, right? Now the true work can begin. All right. Now the number two. Okay. Number two. Once you let them know you are a safe person and this is a safe place, they've got to know. Okay. They have got to know that this is going to be a roller coaster ride, but it is going to end up right back where we started. Okay. You think of a roller coaster, right? You think of a roller coaster is, you go and you sit in the roller coaster, and, you fasten your seatbelt, your pull down the lap bar, whatever. Right. And what happens? Somebody comes around, nothing's moving, right? Everything's still, everything's locked in place. Somebody comes around, pulls up on your lap bar to make sure it's locked in place, and they're making sure you're safe. And then everybody takes a look at the track, right? Make sure that there's no obstructions in the track. Make sure that there's nothing that could harm you on that track, right? And then everybody looks at each other. All the workers look at each other. Yep, we're good. Yep, we're good. Okay. And then everybody gives a thumbs up to the conductor. And then the conductor gives you a countdown, right? 3, 2, 1, here we go. And then all of a sudden, after everything is safe, now let's go for a ride, right? They unlock the cart, right? It comes down comes around the bend, and all of a sudden it starts going up, right? And for somebody who really doesn't like heights, right? Somebody who really doesn't, I'm not a huge fan of roller coasters unless I can go on right away, right? I don't really particularly like roller coasters. I don't like standing in line waiting for a roller coaster. If it's going to be 15, 20, 30 minutes to get on a roller coaster, I'm not going to stand in that line. If I could get on and within just a couple of minutes, I'm sitting down, put that lap belt on, I'm good, right? But you come around that corner and all of a sudden, right? And you're going up that hill. And, I look up to the top and there's this flag just kind of blowing in the wind up there. And I'm just keeping my eye on that thing because I know when I get to that flag, we're about to go over the top and right. And so that's a lot of times what a counseling session is like with somebody who is suffering from trauma. You've got to get them to a place where they know they're safe, right? You've got to let them know they're about to take a ride, right? And then you've also got to let them know there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be loop-de-loops, there's going to be, spirals, right? But eventually we're going to come right back to this safe place, right? We're going to stop. We're going to make sure everybody's good. We're going to make sure everybody's safe. We're going to undo your lap bar. You're out of here, right? And you're not taking that roller coaster ride again because you just did, right? Here's the thing, right? That is actually when you're in a counseling session, a pastoral counseling session, right? That ride that you just went on with that person, right? That emotional roller coaster you just went on with that person is actually what the purpose of that is a lot of times it's really just allowing them to play out the trauma that's been trapped inside, right? Their body is still trying to protect them from something. Their body's trying to protect them from some pain, some hurt that they experienced in the past, and allowing them to live that in a safe place, allowing their body to experience that is going to just relieve a lot of that within that session, right? That doesn't mean it's going to cure them. That doesn't mean that it's going to, but it's going to let them know that stress, that severe stress response that they had previously, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? That moment is not right now. Okay. That moment can stay in the past. You can deal with it now in a safe environment with a safe person, but that thing, it allows them to begin to let go of that, right? Hebrews chapter 12 talks about that we have a race to run, right? And in this race, we've got to lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, right? I believe this trauma, right? I believe this trauma that a lot of people carry around is the weight that so easily ensnares us. It's a trap. It's not always that we are holding on to it. A lot of times it's that it is holding on to us. It's not letting us go, right? And so we see here, right? Hannah had a roller coaster ride. She was suffering in every measurable area, right? The body, the soul, the spirit, her social relationships, going back to the components of the self, right? She was suffering in every measurable area. And then we see that instead of dealing with it by going to wine, or instead of dealing with it by going to some other, chemical use, or instead of dealing with it by going into self-harmful behavior or self-mutilation, right? Instead of dealing with it by drowning it out with sexual promiscuity, right? She decides to go into the house of the Lord. She decides to seek God and give God an opportunity to heal her from the inside out, right? And she goes to the priest, and in the presence of the priest, the Bible says she pours herself out, right? And the Bible says after having this opportunity to pour herself out and having the counsel of the priest say to her, may the Lord grant you everything that you've asked for, right? The Bible says that her symptoms began to change, right? Her face was no longer sad. She was able to eat. All of those symptoms symptoms of traumatization, all these symptoms of depression, right? All of those symptoms were relieved. They were alleviated, right? And not only that, but the Bible says then she had a child. So it healed her body, right? Her face was no longer sad. She was able to smile. She was able to eat, right? So the soul was healed. She didn't believe anymore that God was upset with her or punishing her. So it healed her spiritually, right? It did something to her spiritually. And then also you've got to believe that the Bible says she had several children after this. You've got to believe that her relationship, even with her husband, was very much restored, right? And so this opportunity to go on this roller coaster ride, Okay, this opportunity to go on this, emotional roller coaster ride, was something that was so beneficial to her. Right, it was so beneficial to her, and instead of alleviating the pain in a dangerous way, instead of alleviating the pain in an undesirable way, she decided that she was going to the house of the Lord. Right, and so we see here that we do have a part to play. Right, we do have something that we can do. And this is something that I would like to teach more in depth on. This particular video that I did here, teach people more in depth on how to really recognize when people are suffering from low levels of trauma that we can help them with, and then how to go about in a pastoral counseling session to deal with some of that. I believe it's necessary for us to learn that. I believe it's necessary for us to be able to have those skills, to have that toolkit, right, for us to be able to do that, because it's such a necessary thing today, right? Having come from the field of mental health and addiction treatment, right? Having come from those fields, I have seen the overwhelm, right? I've seen the overload. I've seen wait lists that are 12 months out, 18 months out. In other words, somebody's very much in need of services, so they call the place, and the place says, yeah, we'll call you in about 6 months when we might have an opening, might know when we'll call you in 6 months, and by then we might know that if we have an opening or not, because the wait lists are just right. And so I really believe that an untapped resource in support for mental health and addiction issues is the local church. It's your local church, right? I really believe it's an untapped resource in your community. So we're going to go ahead and stop this video here, and we will catch you in the next video, where the plan is to talk about pain. All right. So we'll catch you in the next video, episode number 6.